We're about to go green.
We're back on Unverified. There's a storm coming. There was a storm coming on Sunday night, and here we are in another edition of Unverified. Kyle Cuthbertson, David Land, Tony Donahue. The night that never ended on Sunday, which delayed. We all thought was more than likely going to happen. The Oval champ, the Oval King, Joseph Newgarden, getting the victory. It was a long night. We had a historical Indy Next race that we're going to talk about. We'll make David Land talk a little Indy Next with us as well. There's a 24-hour race that David's been to a few times coming up this weekend. And, of course, bro sources and a lot of rumor mill, silly season discussion already kicking off as we are about a week into the month of June here. Joseph Newgarden, your winner, Marcus Ericsson, and Christian Rasmussen were your podium on Sunday night. We haven't seen the rating yet, I don't believe.
Yeah, it's out.
Oh, I must have missed it, which –
David, I'll tell you. Hold on, I'll break the news.
Let me guess. All
right, Tony, go ahead and guess it.
Promise I haven't seen it. I'm saying it was pretty jumbled up, then FS1. So do you have the peak and the average in front of you?
I have both the average for the Fox portion and the average for FS1.
I'm going to say the average for the Fox portion was 1.2 million.
Oh, you're actually too optimistic.
Oh, no.
You're actually too optimistic. It was 945,000.
That's tough. That is tough, race fans.
FS1, well, no, it's not, because on FS1 it was 217,000.
Oh.
So
1.2 total?
Well, I mean, yeah, but you're counting heads twice there because there's almost true. No way that anybody was switching over from – so the Adam Stern had this. It's 945K on Fox, and that's down from last year's race, which ran on time at 1.012 million. So it's not like a dramatic fall off, despite being delayed and despite starting on FS1, but it's not a huge increase, which I think a lot of people probably were hoping for, especially because last year's race, I think a lot of people forget this. It was kind of a late call in the first place to move it to Sunday night. I think it was originally scheduled at a different date. I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was maybe like a Sunday afternoon race. It was moved to Sunday night. And, with that kind of last-minute change, you would think that would have hurt the TV number a little bit, but obviously the rain hurt it a lot more. So not as bad as I was worried it was going to be, by the way. I thought with all of the delays and the fact that it started on the wrong channel, it was we were going to talk about like 750,000. So I think it's encouraging, believe it or not, that it's almost 1 million despite all of the hurdles that it had to jump over on Sunday night.
Before we look into it a little bit more, the race itself, David, I want your thoughts on this. I heard a lot through the paddock over the last 2 weekends that IndyCar needs a week off after the 500. And if you're not going to have a week off after the Indianapolis 500, you need to have an oval. What are your overall thoughts on the schedule after the 500? And should this race at Gateway, which, look, Worldwide Technology Raceway does a great job of promotion, does a great job of encouraging fans to come out, promotes IndyCar, is great to the media, but could this be moved to a Saturday night? Could this be moved to the Saturday night after the Indianapolis 500? I know that probably shortens that week a little bit for the teams. But where are we on the schedule following the Indianapolis 500? Because I know they're never going to get rid of Detroit because it's Roger Penske's backyard and Chevy, and I get that. But, you go straight to Road America on a test for a couple teams today. Just your overall thoughts on maybe some changes we could see or should see after the Indianapolis 500.
Well, it's not just a couple of the teams. It was the majority of the teams. It was 13 out of the 25 cars that are full time tested today in Road America. By the way, Santino Ferrucci, the fastest over Nolan Siegel and Christian Lundgaard there. But
Must have been the bottom half of the field.
the bottom half of the field. Well, Mick, do you want to know? You want to guess who was slowest?
Marcus Ericsson.
Mick Schumacher.
Uh,
Marcus, I think, was sixth. But the look, the teams can't complain about the schedule if they're going to test the day after a 7-week, whatever it is, in a row stretch there. Yeah, that falls on deaf ears for David if we're going to be complaining about it. And I think IndyCar caught a bad break with the weather at Gateway for sure, because I don't think it would have been a bad TV rating. And it really even wasn't with the delays, right? I think, again, relatively speaking, there was a time and a place where we would have been so happy with 900,000 people for the second race after the Indianapolis 500. Now, granted, our bar was lower than dinosaur bones a couple of years ago, but I think that we're doing okay, right? And I think that the schedule, the way that IndyCar has laid it out, has actually been a positive. I mean, the fact that we're at the halfway mark of the season, just after the Indianapolis 500, the fact that the focus fully shifts to a championship run now, I think is good for the sport, and it gives us some things to talk about as the second half of the season kicks into high gear. I think it's tough because the last thing I really want to do is suggest another drastic dramatic date change for Gateway. It's easy for me to say, but I liked your suggestion. Maybe it was about a year ago, Tony, which was I don't hate the idea of Gateway moving up to be pre Indy 500.
yeah.
I think that wouldn't be the worst idea in the world. Now, of course, you're kind of again front loading the schedule. You'd be shoving another race between what would be Long Beach and the Indy 500 Open Test. So that would be tough. But I think
Paper only had one race.
Well, that's the one problem too that has been brought up to me about running Saturday night at Gateway, which seems like just the most logical thing in the world to do, is the fact that Fox currently has the contract for Saturday night baseball. So you'd have to work and schedule around that. And so I don't know. There's some difficulties with the schedule here. The problem is too, if you run Gateway in the summertime, we all know how hot it gets in St. Louis the further and further you go back into the summertime. I mean, even the second week of June, I mean, we all know we were there. Super hot, super sweaty. So I think you almost need it to be a night race. It's not just a bid for TV ratings, or it's not just a convenience thing. It is like we need it to be cool for the fans to want to show up, and for the drivers to be a little bit comfortable, for the media to be comfortable, and everybody to be comfortable, especially those people on the pit lane who have to stand around wearing 3 layers of Nomex for 2.5 hours. So I think that there are some things that you can look at, but I think on a whole, I think the schedule has been, it's been a little bit tough, but I haven't felt like the schedule has been like a negative. I think it's been a net positive. So even if there are some tweaks in the future to this schedule, I think it's going in the right direction.
Yeah, I would agree. Some tweaks do need to be made. Let's go back to Sunday night. We were all there. Look, we didn't know what was going to happen. The rain was coming in. We had multiple rain delays. Marcus Ericsson drove from 12th up to the lead. Joseph was on a tear. Christian Rasmussen, once again, was on a tear to round out your podium. I thought Rinus VeeKay had a really good night as well. Scotty McLaughlin comes home with the top 5 finish. When at points of the night, it was like, where's Scott? He's once again restarting 12th, once again restarting 15th. He was able to move his way up. I mean, look, you can't do anything about the weather, as we know, which, you wish that you could. It was a long day for everybody. But Joseph Newgarden, let's start there. Obviously driving injured. The Oval King has won 2 of the 3 ovals this season, 3 out of the last 4 overall. He's won 6 at Gateway. It seemed like that race was going to come down to Marcus and Joseph. They had the 2 best cars. It was one of those things where at the end, Rasmussen was right there and kind of faded a little bit late. Marcus didn't have enough to get to Joseph towards the end to make a run for the victory. Kyle, let's start with you. Your thoughts on what we saw with Joseph Newgarden and kind of the inevitable being delayed to ultimately get to the winner of the race for the 4th time in 6 years.
I picked him to win. I knew it was going to happen. I'm an oracle. Simple as that, really. It was cool seeing Marcus kind of have the pace, and it was interesting to hear Joseph after the race talking about not being sure on that restart that Rasmussen was in the fight. I went back and watched the finish. He knew he had to have figured it out at some point because there's no way they race back and forth like that.
Yeah.
Because Joseph and Rasmussen made it sound like once Joseph figured it out, his car was just so much better. But they went back and forth for a couple of laps there. Um, but it was interesting, honestly, because watching the last 100 laps of that race, it felt like Renus and Rasmussen both had the best cars. There was a point before that, the Kyle Collette yellow, where towards the end of the race on that they were just the way they were coming through the field, it felt like Milwaukee. It felt like, with 100 laps to go, Rasmussen was going to easily just pass Newgarden and start taking the lead. And the only guy that might have something for him was VK, who was chasing down Rasmussen from farther back. So it was interesting to get to the end and then find out ultimately in the end that Newgarden did just have the best car. Because I never felt I even said this to David at one point in the end. I was like, I don't think Ericsson has the car. Like, you just saw in comparison to Newgarden and in comparison to Rasmussen. Like, Rasmussen was the only guy who could go catch Newgarden and pass him, which I don't know. I've thought a lot about it. It could also be that could be part of the package, honestly. Like, because we know that teams were running. I think the setups between teams probably changed quite a lot with the less downforce this year, right? Like, I think there was a lot of parity between, which car you were driving this year, which meant that I think once Ericsson ended up in second, I think it was a little bit tougher for the Andretti cars to get back up there. Whereas Rasmussen probably had a really good, short to middle run car where Newgarden was just all around the best. Which I don't know.
Yeah,
What
well,
do you guys think of the package overall?
we didn't know what the package was going to be going into when we talked to drivers on Saturday. Most of them that we asked said that, well, we liked the package from last year, and we thought last year's race was a good race. Why change it? It seemed that IndyCar saw the package that they ran at Phoenix and thought, okay, that was a hell of a race. Let's bring that or that some sort of that package to Gateway. And a lot of drivers weren't fans of it. And even Christian Rasmussen in the podium interviews afterwards said he still wasn't a fan of it. Obviously, Ericsson was because he finished second. It was his best oval finish at Andretti Global. And then Joseph kind of was like, hey, I won the race. So, it doesn't matter as long as I'm up front. So I thought it was okay. I kind of thought there for the middle portion of the race, it was going to be a fuel strategy race with Honda clearly 5 to 7 laps per stint more than Chevy. And then towards the end of the race with the yellows, it was Renus looked good. Christian looked good. Shout out to Kyle Collette, who was having a great night until he had the mechanical failure to take him out of the race. I thought last year's race from a racing standpoint was pretty good, but look, the numbers don't lie. When they have 268 on-track passes, it was pretty thrilling. And then, like you said, though, Kyle, Joseph had the best car at the end, and Marcus couldn't get to him, and Marcus was the second best car. And I don't even think another 10 laps Marcus would have been able to have him. He had one chance where he got a run there with about 20 to go, and when he didn't get the move done, that was it, and it was all Joseph from that point on.
There was a couple of points I had about the package because I actually agree with the drivers. I think last year's was probably
real
better.
Quick.
Yeah.
Let me explain the package real quick. Let me explain what I saw because I was I remember texting the group chat a few times, just kind of like explaining it. Or because I noticed on the TV, the first thing I noticed was I think I saw a tweet where I saw McLaughlin's car and it was missing the element on the front wing because they didn't. I think all the cars had. I checked and all the cars had them for the race, but the big change that happened 2 years ago at Gateway, just to refresh everyone's memory, was that we went from running the short oval package, which if you remember, didn't have the elements on the rear and front wings from the road course kit, because in the road course how it has 2 elements on the front wing, 2 on the rear. We put those on. We ran basically the road course kits for Gateway, and the last 2 years have been amazing. And so I believe, David, what you found out was the big change was the strakes that they were allowed to run under the car. So the biggest changes were underneath the car. But what I found interesting was in qualifying, they actually allowed the teams to remove one of the front wing elements to go back to the short oval kit on the front wing, which I don't think anyone, like, smartly, I don't think anyone did that in the race. I think they knew that, not running that element in dirty air would be a problem. But I am very curious on why they made this change because, like Tony said, Phoenix was really good, but a bigger track, right? So you need more downforce on a track like Gateway. And I'm also confused on why there wasn't any type of release on this, or like anything going into the event saying like, hey, by the way, here's something to talk about. They changed their, like, they kind of like had us like from practice one looking at the practice and kind of guessing. So David, what were your thoughts?
Well, real quick correction. Gateway's a longer track than Phoenix.
Okay, but like,
yeah,
the shorter radius corners, I would say you need
Yes,
more.
yeah.
I would still say you
Yes.
need more downforce in the turns at Gateway than Phoenix.
Yes. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'd have to look at the lap speeds. I still think Gateway's a faster track, like
I think,
overall lap
yeah.
speed.
Well, I think Phoenix is also like a little bit flat. Well,
no, Phoenix has more banking. Phoenix, I think, is a track you can run flat out easier on, and therefore having less horsepower and less downforce works at that track. And I don't think it worked here at Gateway, and let me explain why. At the front of the field, the lead changes came one of two ways. The first way was a lot of the cars that qualified super well were not good in traffic. Palou, Malukas, Kirkwood. They all figured that out real quick. Yeah, they got around Louis Foster, but the minute they got to the back of Stingray Robb, they were stuck. The cars that were able to run well in traffic, Joseph Newgarden, Marcus Ericsson, gone. That's how they got past and got into the lead. And even Marcus made the pass on Joseph in lap traffic. When it was a clean air situation, we really didn't see a competitive lead change. We saw Rasmussen pass Joseph and then Joseph pass him back. But again, Joseph specifically made the point to say, hey, I didn't know he was a lead lap car. I thought I was racing Rossi. And as you mentioned, he figured that out. And at the point that he figured it out, it was bye-bye Joseph. I think Rasmussen, because I asked him about this, admitted as much. His car struggled to run the bottom like a lot of the better cars did. It helped him on the short run to run up top when the track was clean. But we noticed as the run went on, the 21 car went backwards. Like, he had it up there on talent for sure. Like he's freaking Christian Rasmussen on a short oval. But as the run went on, that car went backwards. The best example I can give you of why this package, in my opinion, did not work was specifically Marcus Ericsson. He gave us a couple of examples in the post-race press conference, which was, number one, it was track position that lost him the race. I don't think Joseph would have gotten him if the pit crew hadn't screwed up and gotten the 2 car ahead of him. And you noticed it a couple of times on that last restart when Ericsson did get around kind of the ill-handling car of Rasmussen. He did have a run. It took him about 2 laps to get a run on Joseph. I would notice that he'd have to time it properly. So, meaning you'd have to not get held up in 3 and 4, come all the way around 1 and 2, get the runoff of 2, and then have a chance at 3 and 4. That was the only way one car was going to pass another car of equal strength on merit. And I think with last year's package, you wouldn't have had that. It was a lot like, I heard this comparison made a couple of times. It was almost like a restrictor plate cup race. We heard this at Indianapolis, by the way, too, where you almost have to wind up the pass over the course of a lap because you don't have that horsepower. The horsepower or the turbocharger boost change zapped them of 100 horsepower over last year. That's a significant amount of power. Yeah, sure. I don't think the racing was nearly as hurt as bad as I think we worried it would be. I thought this race was still pretty fun and exciting to watch, and it wasn't bad. But I feel like last year's package would have raced a heck of a lot better. I am curious, too. You mentioned about why certain things can't be a certain way. they changed the tire compound this year to the Phoenix compound because there were some tire failures last year, or at least some tire issues that they didn't like about last year's Gateway race. But I'm curious, and I would be interested to find out an answer to this, why you couldn't run with the Phoenix tire with 100 horsepower more, why that would suddenly cause trouble, or why you couldn't run with 100 horsepower more with the strakes gone off of the cars, for example. And Kyle, that's a great point, and I know you and I talked about this quite a bit throughout the weekend, is I'm sure the answer IndyCar would probably give us is, well, it's in the rule book, but I think from a communication standpoint, I think IndyCar should communicate when they make technical changes that are different from last year, especially significant ones where, we're not talking about like they just removed the strakes or they just changed the turbocharger boost. They changed the turbocharger boost and removed the strakes. That's a big technical change. And that's something if you expect the media to do a better job, like sometimes you need to kind of like lead the horse to water. It doesn't mean they're going to drink, but you got to at least, because I'll give Firestone credit. I had a release in my inbox from Firestone that told me, hey, the tire compound changed. We're running the Phoenix tire on the right side of a car. And that helped me ask questions in the press conference. But the only reason I knew there was a technical change was because I watched Scott Dixon's PNC Bank race preview on Instagram, where he was like, yeah, we're going to have less horsepower and less downforce. I was like, what? That's news to me. So, and he probably filmed that at frickin' Sebring, right? So they've known about this for a while, but as usual, the media's in the dark about it.
It's one of those things that they probably didn't even want to say, which is it's a little bit telling. I agree that the problem is, like, if this is a day race, it's one of the most saddest things of the year, because it would have been such a terrible race if it was a day race.
Oh yeah.
Like the temperatures and them actually having the ability to run the high side made it a race. And yeah, unfortunately, we've had the last 2 years where Gateway was probably the best race of the season, and it kind of fell back into what it honestly, like, all the package really did for me, and what I could tell is it made it more like the 2020 whatever years in the 2020s that we've had. I think they ran 1 or 2 night races that didn't have the big downforce package, right? Like, and honestly, it took me a little bit back to when we did this thing in 2019 when I went, and it was like a good race, but like if 2 of the best cars got out to the lead and there was no lap traffic, yeah, you're kind of cooked. Like, it's just, that's the race at that point.
So Joseph Newgarden gets the win. Marcus Ericsson in a contract year has his best oval for Andretti Global. A week ago, we were kind of discussing what to do with Christian Rasmussen, and David pretty much nailed it right on the head. Hey, he's going to Ed Carpenter Racing should re-sign him because he can win on a short oval. He charged from 19th all the way to 3rd to score a podium. As we mentioned, a great run for Rinus VeeKay as well. Earlier that day, there was a communication issue on Saturday in Indy Next qualifying, which Miles Rowe continued on a qualifying run after taking the checkered flag. He was then moved to the back of the field for the race on Sunday. Points leader Enzo Fittipaldi had an issue. Hell, I had to run his car out, basically, to the grid as I'm sprinting by the media center, moving gates. But Miles Rowe drives from the back to the front for the victory. David, first and foremost, we are all impressed with that race. And then the question that continues to come up with Miles Rowe is does he land an IndyCar, and when will he get his first IndyCar test?
Man, and I am so glad you brought up the Christian Rasmussen comparison, because I have a bunch of dumbasses coming at me on Twitter saying Miles Rowe can only race on ovals and he's only shown anything on ovals. And I say, well, Christian Rasmussen just got a bag because he can run well at 6 races a year. So why Miles Rowe has not been, and by the way, the most important race and the one that pays all the big bucks and the race that the reason the series exists in the first place is an oval, by the way. The fact that Miles hasn't been given an opportunity is starting to stick out like a sore thumb. And I understand he's under the Penske umbrella, and so maybe that complicates things a little bit. Maybe some teams don't want to touch him because of that. Maybe he's contractually obligated to only, test for Team Penske. But I'm just starting to get surprised and confused as to why he hasn't been given an IndyCar opportunity. I mean, when you go from worst to first at Gateway, that is in a 24-car field. We're not talking about an Indy Next field that of the past where it would be 7 or 8 cars, right? This was a pretty impressive race win. And Miles has done this in the past. I mean, I remember Iowa a couple of years ago, which I think it was his first win. He just drove through the field and just looked super impressive. And, you know, in an Indy 500 where you can look at 4 or 5 of the drivers in the field and say, okay, what have you really done on an oval track before? And yet they're, in some cases, in very, very competitive seats, not really doing anything, kind of mid-pack. Are we really pretending like Miles Rowe, if you gave him an IndyCar, wouldn't be on pace, wouldn't be competitive? I just don't think that that's the case. And also, you know, okay, maybe he isn't as good on the road courses as some other drivers. He still finished second at Detroit 2 weeks ago. And, you know, some drivers, believe it or not, look kind of mid in Indy Next, and then they get to IndyCar and they look amazing. Or vice versa. Some drivers look great in Indy Next and look mid in IndyCar. I don't necessarily think Indy Next and your results there totally translate to IndyCar racing. It's kind of is driver dependent. So we really don't know what Miles Rowe is capable of doing in an IndyCar until the kid drives an IndyCar, and he hasn't driven one yet. So that's where I'm kind of running into an issue.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Kyle.
So my biggest point on this, I think I mentioned this to David the other day, is I said in the last 5 years of Indy Next, how many drivers had more than one win that didn't at least get a test in IndyCar, right? It's not a big list. When you look at the drivers currently in IndyCar who have more than one Indy Next win, what Stingray won once at Laguna, Kiffin didn't win any. I mean, you go down the line of our current grid, Miles has now won more races than any of them and hasn't even had a test. It's not even being talked about really outside of any fans, right? And yeah, there's a lot of people. I mean, he finished second at Detroit, and you say he sucks on road courses, and that's been the general opinion I've seen. People forget he's a USF champion on both rungs. Like the kid, like his first season, he was in USF. Everyone forgets. Lost his funding because he crashed too much. And then he won at the end of the season, funded 6 races for the next year by himself, and, you know, crowdfunded it, got the 6 races, made the most of it, and won the freaking championship. Like, in so many scenarios, this kid is someone that everyone would like root for, right? And want him to succeed. He won the Indy Pro title. Like, he's here in Indy Next on merit. And now he has 3 wins on an oval and absolutely deserves a minimum of a test. It's ridiculous.
I think there's a couple things with Miles Rowe. One, it is ridiculous he doesn't have a test. He's all of a sudden 5th in points. He's not too far from striking distance. And we kind of talked about this over the last couple of weeks. Let's wait till the ovals show up, right? Let's wait till those veteran drivers. And look, 2 of the 3 podium finishers over the weekend were veteran Indy Next drivers. But the problem with Miles Rowe right now is it's now or never, right? He's not going to run another year of Indy Next season. He's not going to come back and even run just the ovals on Indy Next. It's either go to IndyCar now or you're going to have to go find somewhere else. So when you talk about the silly season and where Miles Rowe could possibly land, I think right now the most realistic situation is some sort of Indianapolis 500 one-off. I think with the diversity program that IMS has and NXG, and obviously they dumped Ernie Francis for Miles Rowe, you have to get him to at least the Indianapolis 500 bare minimum. You can't have him get to Indy Next, winning races, winning oval races, and not at least be on an entry list for the Indianapolis 500. Now, is that maybe with Abel, right? That's the team that he's with now, who also has Max Garcia, who is in that Penske pipeline. Do you maybe run that Foyt car with Abel next year that Catherine Legge was in for the 500? Those are possibilities. If Kyle Collette moves on to another ride, maybe he gets the 4 car for that 1 year in a DW12 chassis before we go to the new car. The season's not over yet. He's 5th in points. He's all of a sudden right back in the thick of it with a second place at Detroit and that win. Don't forget, we still have Milwaukee coming up. Yes, there are a lot of road course doubleheaders coming up for Indy next, but I think we're going to be talking about Miles Rowe contending for a championship. Now, I don't feel that he has to win the championship to get that scholarship to advance to an IndyCar seat, whether it's full-time or whether it's just the Indianapolis 500. Obviously, it would help immensely, but we have to see this guy test. I mean, a Milwaukee makes sense to go for a test, a track that he's been to, maybe even in Nashville. And you can do it in a Foyt car, guys. You could take him down in a Foyt car and test him at Nashville and have that extra test day. Maybe him and Kyle go down there and test, and Santino takes a test off, and you get that extra test day for having an Indy Next driver in there. But I think bare minimum, David, you have to have him at least on the Indianapolis 500 entry a year from now.
Yeah, and you mentioned a big part of this, right? Like, let's not beat around the bush, right? Like, Miles is kind of like the first wave, I guess technically second behind Ernie Francis, of this diversity program that Penske Entertainment put in place around 2020, 2021. And you look at what Miles has done. I think Miles has ticked pretty much every box that he needs to, right? Like, I'm not sure. I mean, I guess he could go out and win a championship, right? That's the one thing that he hasn't done. Hasn't won the championship in Indy next. But outside of that, I don't know what else you can really expect from him at this point to be worthy of an opportunity. And if you put this much money and this much investment and this much time into Miles, and then you don't give him an opportunity in IndyCar, then what was it all for? What were we trying to accomplish here? And what does that tell anyone in a similar position or similar background what the future holds, right? I think there are more than just like the objective facts of this is a good race car driver who is a race-winning race car driver and is deserving of an opportunity. It also kind of like goes to what Penske Entertainment has said they're going to do, or has implied what they're going to do, or what is important to them value-wise. So I think it's super important for a large variety of reasons. Probably, a lot of the same reasons I think Catherine Legg got into the Indy 500 this year, right? So I think at the bare minimum, like a third Foyt car, especially since it was made available for Catherine this year, like that seems like obvious to me. And you mentioned Able Motorsports. Like, I mean, obviously, I think Able Motorsports, too, I want to talk about them just in general about the Indy 500. Yeah, the results weren't there, but I felt like Jacob did a really, really solid job, and I don't think a lot of people give that credit. I don't think people are giving that team credit for two solid Indy 500 performances that they've done. Frankly, if they come to you next year and they ask for two engines, give it to them, Chevy. Jacob Able and Miles Rowe, two-car Indy 500 program, make it so. Let's do it,
Yeah, and to that point, I mean, Michael Cannon joined him for race weekend. That was somebody who obviously brought a lot of experience to the table, something that I don't think was talked about all that much. And you get an opportunity with two cars. And Jacob Able will tell you this, and any driver who's done a one-off effort, it is so important to have a second teammate, to have feedback. You can send one car out on a Wednesday and work on a little bit of a qualifying setup while the other driver, the Jacob Able, let's say the veteran driver of that team, can set up the race car. It really makes your program that much better to have two cars compared to one car. And like you said, he's already driving for Able. Maybe the Foyt connection makes sense. I mean, there was rumors kind of in the offseason that maybe Able and Foyt could do something. I mean, hell, they can look out each other's doors at their shops here in Speedway and see each other. But I think bare minimum, it can't be about money, right? If Roger's going to do this, there has to be money there. And I'm hard pressed to not believe that you can't find sponsorship for Miles Rowe. You can't tell me an Advanced Auto Parts or one of Penske's sponsors wouldn't want to be a part of that program, wouldn't want to be a part of that story and the eyes that will be on Miles Rowe attempting to qualify for the Indianapolis 500. And even if there is more than 33 cars on the entry list, which I expect next year there will be, you still have that storyline of Miles Rowe. And, David, I hope they don't rush it. I hope it's not put together last minute. Like, you have to give him time to be in that open test, to do some sim work, have a test, and have time to prep. So if this is going to happen, I would like to see this happen come, fall or early November for an announcement.
To your point, Tony, they didn't have any trouble farming sponsors out to Malukas when he was at Foyt.
Yeah. No, you're right. Clarence Technology comes to mind.
And Gallagher. You're telling me, I mean, just like, And again, I don't know how the business works. Like, I am freely spending other people's money here, just FYI. But you're telling me if you're Penske, you can't go to one of your sponsors, title partners at some of the other races and say, hey, if you kick in a little bit more, we'll get you a primary for the Indy 500 with this kid Miles Rowe, who's going to be this great story, and it's going to get you a ton of press.
100%.
Like, really, you can't go to PPG or XPEL or whoever and be like, you want to be the primary sponsor for this kid? It's going to cost you virtually nothing more on what we're already asking from you. I don't know. Maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but again, they did it for Malukas, so I don't see why you couldn't do it for Miles.
And I think, when we start to talk silly season, which we're probably about to, I mean, I think Miles Rowe in a very small capacity is going to be on the Indianapolis 500 entry list, Kyle.
So I figure on the note of Miles here, while we're getting into seats and Indy Next, I think talking a little bit about Indy Next could kind of rail us into silly season discussion. So I've seen a couple comments on people pointing out some drivers in Indy Next who are doing really well this season. First of all, your points leader, Nikita Johnson, serves an interesting point, and a point I want to make, because a lot of people have been talking about Miles Rowe in his third season. And David, as long as I've known you, since the day I met you, we were watching the Freedom 100. I remember your opinion has been like, do not rush people out of Indy Lights. Keep them for 2 years, even if they win the title. Like, do not rush. Nikita Johnson, guys, even if he wins this championship this year, the kid is 18 years old. Yeah. And like, I'd be like, Colton Herta ran at 19, but like the way that we just talked about how full the grid is right now. Any ride he's going to get isn't going to be top. And imagine if he went into being 20 years old and it was a 2-time Indy Next champion, right?
In a new car, not learning the old car for 1 year and then hopping into a new car.
Right. So I think no matter what he does, he's exceeding expectations. Enzo Fittipaldi is an interesting prospect because he's already run in Europe F2, and he's won 2 races now, and that he is definitely, I think, going to be in play. There's Timmy Kucharzik.
Timmy Kachow.
Timmy Kachow. Everyone's going to struggle with that because he's eventually going to make it to IndyCar, I think. Like, that kid has been on fire. Max Taylor, I think, is another kid like Nikita that probably has 2 years. But, like, there's so many talents right now. DeTulio is with Foyt. He looks like, he's winning the pole for almost every race. I think he's had a few, a few mishaps.
He's gotten wrecked more than he's made mistakes, though.
There's been things during the races that haven't really been his fault because he should be higher in the points and he should have won more races because he's, 5 poles? It's crazy. There's Miles. I think that entire top 6 in points right there in Indy Next are in contention for rides. But we heard I'm sure you guys got some dude bro sources. There's a lot of open seats. What are your thoughts?
Well, David had a video, I believe, Friday evening. Look, there hasn't really been too much discussion of Joseph Newgarden. Some say that he's already locked up with Penske. Others say that he hasn't been. David, I think you and I are in agreement until he takes himself out of that 2 car, or until I show up at St. Pete next year and he's not in that 2 car. I believe that he will be in that 2 car for the future. Now, other things have emerged this weekend involving one of the best of all time, and that's Scott Dixon. So, David, let's start there with maybe some of the things that you're hearing compared to some of the things that I'm hearing when it comes to Scott Dixon, because I believe now he becomes the top domino to fall, and the ability to either stay with Ganassi and make silly season, for lack of a better term, not as chaotic, or if he were to leave and the 9 car becomes open, the funnel effect of that could be absolute chaos throughout the grid.
Yep. So it's been long understood. So a lot of this stuff with Ganassi and the contracts is really tough because they simply don't talk about it. I think maybe they confirmed that Palou has signed a contract extension, but there wasn't a huge amount of talk about it. And I think it partially was buried in a lot of like the end of the McLaren lawsuit stuff. But Palou has signed an extension with Ganassi. And typically, from what I understand, Scott Dixon does 1-year contracts and usually signs them pretty early in the year. So early, in fact, that he usually has a clause in his contracts that he can, if we reach a certain point in the year, can start openly negotiating with other teams. it is my understanding that Scott Dixon has reached that point in the year where he is free to negotiate with other teams. Now, does that mean he is actively negotiating with other teams? We don't know that. Does it mean he's going to go anywhere but Ganassi? We don't know that. Does that mean he intends on signing a contract with Ganassi for next year? We don't know that. The only thing that I'm pretty sure of is that he has not signed with Ganassi as of right now, and he now can negotiate with other teams if he so desires. So, to your point, Tony, I think a lot of people are waiting around right now for Scott Dixon, some of those bigger dominoes, some of those drivers that I'm sure Kyle's about to tell us about who are currently sitting as free agents right now are probably looking at that 9 car going, is that going to be available to me? Do I want to go sign for Ganassi? I think part of this is like, you look at a guy like Felix Rosenquist, for example, wins the Indy 500. That is about as job secure as you're going to get. And yet, we haven't had an announcement of a contract extension yet. I think that's pretty telling.
Well, and Kyle, before we get to the list, this is what I'll say about free agency, kind of having some talks with some people that would know. As we always mention, what is true today might not be true tomorrow, might not be true in 2 weeks, okay? Things can change. What agents do and what drivers in play of a new contract do, just like in a lot of sports, is they will leak some stuff or they'll put some stuff out there. Rumors will happen that another team is looking for that driver's talents, and all of a sudden an agent tries to take their client and make their client worth a little bit more. Hey, we've got this offer over here from this other team. Do you want us to go to this other team, or do you want to meet us where we want to be? Do you want to pay us where we feel we should be? Now, look, when it comes to Scott Dixon, David, Kyle, and I think everybody in the chat will agree with this. He's one of the most respected guys, if not the most respected driver around. He doesn't really bitch, complain about much, which he's done a lot this year. The hybrid comes to mind multiple times. You're right, David. The unrestricted to restricted free agent, that time has come up. He's probably shopping around to see what other offers there are to kind of go to Ganassi and say, this is what I want. The other rumor that I heard over the weekend was there's a chance that maybe Dixon retires. And that has always kind of been the talk over the last year or two. Like, is he going to go back to Europe, continue to raise his family? His son is getting into racing, I believe. So who knows? Does McLaren come after him and say, here's the money we're going to pay you? And Scott takes at the Chip and say, you want to match this? And Chip says, I don't want you going anywhere. I either want you to retire or to be in my car, and there's nothing in between. So what do we got to do to get to that point? That's kind of more where I am leaning right now. I have had people tell me that McLaren and Dixon is very popular right now. But again, is that just smoke and mirrors trying to get, is that an agent trying to get that out there so that Chip comes to the table and says, we will pay you this to stay in our car? So, Kyle, let's go through some of those other drivers that are free agents right now, because there's 3 options for Dixon. It's stay, it's retire, and it seems like possibly a shot at McLaren, but I think that's how it is. I think it's stay with Ganassi is 1A right now. 1B would be to retire, and 1C would be to go to McLaren.
I think I agree with you, honestly. It's definitely hard to picture Scott Dixon in another car, and I do think that, especially in his circumstance right now, that he would be trying to get paid, maybe use going to McLaren as a way to say, hey, they want to pay me this. Can you match that or go above? Because I do think McLaren, I think the biggest get back McLaren could get would be saying to Chip, hey, we just signed Scott Dixon. You know how much of a slap in the face that would be? Oh boy. Other free agents, obviously nothing new with Rasmussen getting signed, which is crazy. Right after I start mentioning it, I thought that they would probably do that if they were to, after Gateway, after he got a podium, if he did well, they would just be like, oh, we're going to announce it right at. I thought it was ballsy to announce it before, and honestly, I respect him for it. He jumped himself up to 22nd in the points. So he's good. It's interesting that car is locked up too, because that kind of puts looking to next year, that kind of puts Rossi in a situation where either I think he's in a contract year, I would say next year, and then it's either hang it up or I'm sure Ed would keep him. But when you have Nikita Johnson right there in the pipeline, and you see, and Java House just put all this money into their USF pipeline, like, you have to think, like, the results have to start coming, or all that money they dumped in that pipeline has to go somewhere, right? There's Nolan, and I would actually at some point, usually around Mid Ohio is when we start asking these questions, but around this time, I would actually be interested in hearing what the status McLaren has on Lundgaard, because I honestly would have expected that to have been announced by now, like an extension, or at least like a, he's not going anywhere, guys, like, shut up. I will say on the McLaren front, I am actually starting to get, like, just kind of reading Pato, probably reading too much into it, and also looking at the results. I'm starting to have questions about Pato next year and what he's going to do, because he's a free agent for 27. So that's something to just keep watching Pato and track that. But yeah, Felix and Armstrong are free agents. They still don't know what they're going to do. And then Juncos and Dale Coyne remain pretty up in the air. And I think Stingray, honestly, everyone kind of sees the writing on the walls there, where I think Juncos, I think there's some drivers coming in that could bring better results with the same, if not funding, to fund that car and give them some better results and be in the leader circle.
So, David, let's start with Meyer-Shank Racing here. Obviously, as you mentioned, Felix Rosenqvist wins the Indianapolis 500. Marcus Armstrong was in contention to win the Indianapolis 500. Marcus Armstrong has proved to everybody in the sport that he is, I don't want to say a complete driver, but he's a driver that can contend on all three disciplines, whether it's the ovals, whether it is a street course or a road course. He's performed. He's stood on the podium at those type of races. The only way, David, I see Felix Rosenqvist not being in the 60 car next year is if he were to go back to Ganassi and land that 9 car, which means Scott Dixon would have to exit stage left. Now, if Dixon stays in the 9, Felix stays in the 60. Does Armstrong go to the 9 car? Some things that I've heard is that, Chip does like his homegrown drivers and the drivers that he brought over. And I think Armstrong would be in play for the 9 car as well. But I just think for the sake of camaraderie and the sake of keeping the Indianapolis 500 winner and the car that he won the Indianapolis 500 win, I certainly don't see Felix going anywhere. But again, it depends on what happens with the 9 car. And if the 9 car becomes open and then becomes vacated by a driver who's currently at MSR, then we could talk about who lands in either the 60 or the 66. But as far as I know, if Dixon stays, I think Meyer-Shank runs it back how they have it.
Yeah, there's a couple of interesting things about some of the things you guys have talked about. I guess we'll start with Shank, because you look at the Shank cars, and actually as things are beginning to, you kind of look, I think Kyle's made a great point the last couple of weeks is, we're not only looking at the contracts for 27, but we're looking at where do you need to position yourself for 2028 and beyond. And despite the fact that Meyer-Shank Racing is a team that has won exactly 2 races in its history of it being an IndyCar team, it's won 2 Indianapolis 500s. And more importantly, to that point, once we get to 2028 and beyond, they become the Honda factory team. They've got an extra car coming in. They are, supposedly going to get, I would imagine, the best stuff. They're going to have the most up-to-date data. They are going to be working directly with the OEM that supplies their engine. So if you are a driver who's a free agent, or if you're a driver currently sitting at that team, I would be very cautious about leaving willingly. And if I'm a driver on the outside, or who might be on the outside, like a Marcus Ericsson or someone of that, even a Renus VK, I might take a look at Shank and see if I can finagle my way into getting into one of those cars. Even if 2027 is a regression for me, 2028 might be a progression. On Scott Dixon, here's another thing, a couple of selling points on Scott Dixon, not only for him to go to McLaren, potentially, but also Scott Dixon, the driver, and by extension, a lot of drivers who are older and have a lot of experience. On the McLaren front, here's what's attractive to Scott Dixon. Scott could go there and work with Tony Kanaan, can go there and work with Ryan Hunter-Reay. He's already playing second fiddle to Pato, so or to Palou, what's going and playing second fiddle to Pato, right? it's a team that has a basis in its formation in New Zealand. Bruce McLaren was a Kiwi. In the past, they have offered ownership stake in the team to Scott Dixon. Back in 2019, they made a very strong play to get Scott Dixon. It's part of why Chip always complains about how much money Dixon's making from him, because he took that offer to Chip, said, they're offering me this, and Chip matched or exceeded it, to your point. The other factor, and the chat's brought it up a couple of times, is that there is an exit strategy if you go to McLaren, especially if you have ownership stake. They're always going to do an extra or maybe a couple extra at the Indianapolis 500. So if you want to continue to chase your second Indy 500 win, you can do that. But they also have a brand new World Endurance Championship program with the McLaren Hypercar, and plans to eventually bring that program into IMSA. Scott Dixon loves racing sports cars. He's been doing it for many, many years. He might not have an opportunity to race sports cars next year because Shank lost the Honda program, and there really isn't a place for Scott Dixon to go race sports cars. If he went to McLaren, well, all of a sudden he can go back to the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and in 2028 he can race the Rolex and a few other races with McLaren in IMSA. So there's a couple of different things there on the McLaren side that I think are attractive to Scott Dixon as he looks long-term. But a driver like Scott Dixon, and even to a lesser extent, drivers like Ryan Hunter-Reay, who, by the way, again, kind of is now very much embedded on that McLaren side of things. Older drivers, Scott even told me this weekend, is that older drivers used to spend 60 days a year testing equipment, testing new cars. This was a constant thing that in the kart days and even the early IRL days, drivers would do. Drivers nowadays don't have that kind of experience. They don't do development, especially in the intensive way that you need to do to develop a brand new chassis. So a driver like Scott Dixon is extremely attractive to me if I'm an IndyCar team owner, even if it's a short-term contract, because he might be able to help me set up my 2028 car for the future.
Let me ask you this. When it comes to Scott Dixon, and somebody has told me this, okay? It's not somebody that I don't know would know, but this is – look, some of these things, David, as you know, just find us. Sometimes we don't go around looking. You get a DM or somebody stops you. Somebody has told me that there is a very strong chance that McLaren and Dixon are happening next year. Does this make sense from a standpoint of we haven't officially heard that Ryan Hunter-Reay will be back in that Indianapolis 500 car next year? Does possibly McLaren run Dixon full-time in the 6, or could you go get somebody else for the 6? Ryan Hunter-Reay steps aside, and Dixon only runs the Indianapolis 500 with McLaren next year. Or kind of both of the things that I'm hearing would technically be correct. Yes, he is kind of retiring, but he's still going to run the 500. And yes, he could still end up at McLaren.
Man, I just don't know. I mean, like the whole thing, the thing with Dixon is he's very good at not giving away his feelings. I mean, even when you ask about the total win record, right? Like him chasing AJ Foyt. Like, I believe in my heart of hearts he actually wants to do that. But he'll never tell you that. If you ask him about that, he's like, yeah, the stats will work out when I'm done. Right? Not hanging out with Scott Dixon every weekend. Some people get to, it's not me. But my personal opinion is that I think legacy does matter to Scott Dixon. So
and the storm has hit where David stands.
The storm is brewing. It hit.
The storm is brewing, and David has been frozen. I think David's point, if I'm not mistaken, is basically, you know, if you're Scott Dixon and you're Chip Ganassi, do you really want to split ways? Hold on, David. We've lost you. The storm has hit where you are, so we can get you cleared back up. I think the point that he's trying to make is basically, Kyle, if you're Dixon and you're Chip Ganassi, what does Chip have to do to come and say, hey, it's with us or nothing at all? What do we have to give you to make this happen, and what can we do to match whatever offer McLaren has brought to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think to David's point, which I believe he's back, I think.
Hello, I'm back, I think. Maybe.
I think it would be a risk for Scott Dixon to take that Indy 500 seat, because, I mean, when you look at the history of the McLaren IndyCar program, those drivers who are good at one team haven't really been able to successfully transfer over to those cars immediately. It's kind of taken a little bit of time to get acclimated. And I just don't know if it'd be worth the risk at this point. Like same way as like Hunter Ray, honestly. I didn't really think about it until his run this year. And I think a lot of the reason, I think that honestly that car and the theories at Era McLaren and the way they set up their cars honestly just maybe doesn't fit the older generation of IndyCar driver. You know what I mean? Like I think it'd be a little bit of a risk for Scott Dixon if he goes there and wasn't fast.
Well,
can I throw something out?
I agree with you on this real quick, David, because I want your opinion on it too. You can't win the 500 as a one-off. I'm sorry. I know everybody thinks really you can. Quick. Hunter Ray got close, but you cannot win the 500 as a one-off effort.
Well, except for Elio Castroneves and Dan Weldon and a couple of other of the great names that we would probably play Scott Dixon.
Elio coming out of the pandemic. Yeah, okay. Elio in 2021. Okay, cool. Go back and look at those wheels. Go back and look at those wheels.
Dan winning with Brian Hurd Autosport, a team that crashed their way into the Indy 500 the year before. That's about as one-off as it gets. So
yeah, but they had a possible. Shit. I mean,
it's possible. All I'm saying is it's possible. You got to be in the right situation with the right driver in the right car, 100%. But it is possible.
Two legendary drivers got it done. One with
Scott's legendary. Scott could do it. But here's the thing. Here's I think our biggest hint, and I think we're kind of underselling this, by the way. Why would you burn the house down about the hybrid if you're going to be in a Honda next year?
Yeah.
I'm just like, why? I mean, I get that Scott
when it comes to that.
Scott has been critical in the past. He's never been this openly critical in the past. Like I think there's a change, and it almost feels like a guy who's like he's got senioritis. That's what I kind of feel like with Scott Dixon. He's in the DGAF phase of wherever he is in his career right now. And the point I did want to make about Scott Dixon is I don't think he wants to necessarily be a one-off. I think if he's going to do it, he's going to commit to the full season. That's my opinion. That was the point I was trying to make.
Let's talk about a few other possible free agents, and I think somebody that comes to mind is Kyle Collette. He had a really good weekend going over the path at St. Louis. He's got talent. I think we know that. David, does somebody like Kyle Collette, who has Brazilian money, make sense to go to the 6 car at McLaren? You probably make up for the money that is going to exit stage left at the end of the year when NTT Data seemingly might be leaving the team. You pair him with another Brazilian and Tony Kanaan. That also seems to make some sense. Although I know Kyle Collette's been on the Penske radar, but at some point you get to a point where there's no place to put him.
Yeah, no, I think Kyle is quickly making a case for himself. In fact, I think all 3 of the rookies this year, Kyle Collette, Mick Schumacher, and Dennis Hauger, all have a lot of potential. If you're Kyle, honestly, like the best seat might be just stay at Foyt. I like, because unless you can get to McLaren, and I mean maybe McLaren next year, to Kyle's point, is Award, Dixon, and Collette. I mean, that would be kind of crazy, right? But again, I think if you're Kyle, I would stay at Foyt. I don't know if there's something that's really that much better than what he's currently in right now.
Yeah, I don't see Lundgaard leaving McLaren. I just with the win where he is in points, I would be shocked if Lundgaard exits stage left at McLaren. But again, we talked about this last offseason, David. There's just too many asses and not enough seats, simply, especially knowing next year that you're not going to be able to run an extra car at any races besides the 500, which nobody's doing really this year either. Let's talk about Dennis Hauger, as you mentioned. It seems like he is under that Andretti contract. Does he go to the 28 car, which would leave Marcus Ericsson open as a free agent? And then ultimately, where would Marcus Ericsson land? Because maybe it's a Shank deal. Maybe he goes somewhere else. But again, it seems to me that Dennis Hauger is more than likely going to end up at Andretti, whether it's next year with the current car we have, or do you sign Ericsson for a 1-year deal and then you start fresh with Dennis Hauger in the new car in 2028 at Andretti?
Boy, Ericsson's starting to race too well. I mean, he's really starting to come on at this stage in the season. That's what it's hard to argue against Ericsson right now.
Can I agree, but can I make a point? I think that you have to sign Ericsson to a 1-year deal simply on the fact that the first 2 years, like I don't think the last season of the contract being good permits you like a 3-year deal or a multi-year extension. I think you give him a 1-year deal because you say, well, it's obvious that you need a fire under your ass to be this fast, right? Like prove it again, like do it again, because we have Dennis Hauger right here in the wings, and he's gonna chase you again. And if you can prove us wrong, like again, then yeah, I think it absolutely. If it's anything more than a 1-year deal, I don't think he's justified that yet.
If I was Marcus, I'd try to go to Shank though. I would try if that's even a remote possibility for Marcus, I'd go to Shank.
Let me ask you this, David. With this new car coming in, whenever the hell we see it, and whenever the hell it starts testing, what is going to be the regulations for next year in testing the new car? Is each team going to get 1 or 2 tests? We've heard in the past Graham Rahal, Santino Ferrucci complaining about they simply haven't gotten enough test time, let's say, with the hybrid compared to other teams. So do you have to look at, okay, we need to have somebody in our car testing that new car that is going to be in our race car in 2028?
Oh my God. Well, we got to make sure the new car exists first. I've heard all sorts of different things about what state it actually is in. But like, I mean, we got to get it on the track first. Then we've got to figure out when the new engine's going to be in the car. Then we've got to figure out how to get them distributed to the teams. I mean, this is getting messy, boys. And I don't want to I think some people probably got a little too alarmist about what we were talking about. I think it was last week with the car. Like, it's still on track for 2028, as far as I am aware. But like, the more and more and more you start to hear, the more and more worried that you get. I mean, that's the best thing I can tell you right now about where the paddock kind of stands in regards to the new car. I don't think it. I don't want to like press the panic button, but like, we haven't seen it. Nobody really understands or knows exactly when it's going to test. Again, we had a report from Marshall Pruitt before May that it was going to run in July with the 2.2 liter engine. What's the update on that? And remember, like Doug Bowles told us, about 8 months ago that we'd see it in Q1. That's currently Q2 of 2026.
Yeah. I was told to expect to at least see it by mid-Ohio. Now, whether or not they test it the next day like we saw in the past, possibly, but we still have to see it. If we do have David here, is he back? Oh, no, he's sped up and then he froze again. So, David, let me ask you this real quick, if you're there, before we wrap up the silly season talk. Where do we stand on somebody like Colin Milot? Where do we stand on Prema, who seems to have gone silent over the last couple of months, where the last we heard was they were going to be sitting out until 2028? How do they break back into the sport? And what does that ultimately mean for the field in 2027 and 2028?
Ilot's still around. He was there this weekend, and he's probably going to be around the rest of the season. Of course, if there is an open seat at Ganassi, I know he was looked at one point for a Ganassi seat, so stranger things have happened, I suppose. But
David has been swept away with the rain.
Better buy a charter, buddy, if you're gonna
run. All we heard was Colin Milot has been looked at, and you better buy a charter, buddy.
Well, there you go. Well, Callum, I don't know. I said Callum would be an interesting pick for Ganassi, and buy a charter.
All right, let me throw a crazy scenario at you while you're frozen. What if? Are we sure Mick Schumacher's under a 2-year deal at Rahal?
We're not sure of anything, Tony. I'm not sure of my internet.
I don't think he is.
So does maybe Chip say, "Hey, Mick, why don't you come over and run the 9 car?" Is that maybe something that's a little far-fetched that could come to fruition? And then, 2, David, when it comes to signing contracts, who's ultimately going to be that Chevy factory driver, and who's ultimately going to be that Honda factory driver, and how does that coming in 2028 affect free agency heading into 2027?
Well, you got to hope that there is a Chevy factory car to begin with. I think a lot of people think that it's Kakuota lock, stock, and barrel at that third Meyer Shank car 2 years from now, but you never know. Again, it's kind of like, I mean, I guess if we're assuming that those two seats are number one, real, which in the case of Honda it is, and number two, available, which in the case of Honda it might not be. Yeah, I mean, maybe you do want to do a 1-year deal to potentially end up at a factory team in 2028. So I think that factors in. It has to, right? Like there are certain benefits to being directly aligned with an OEM, right? So I don't think there is zero factor in those two teams joining the grid in 2028.
To your point that you just made, and then a second question, because there's a driver that needs to be brought up when we talk to free agency. One, are we sure that Shank becomes 3 cars with that manufacturer backing? Do they maybe give up one of their race cars and that charter could go somewhere else? Maybe Ganassi could run a 4th, kind of keeping that same amount of cars in the stable. And 2, we've talked all this, and there's a driver who finished 4th over the weekend that is up at the end of the season. What happens with Rinus VeeKay?
So based on the charter agreement, you can't have 4 cars. You can't have 4 charters. So that would eliminate Ganassi from that. Honda's pretty consistently and repeatedly said that Shank's the factory team. Wouldn't expect that to change. I mean, you could say, if you're Shank, you could, I suppose, sell a charter. I'm not sure why you would. I think that just essentially being gifted a 3rd car, it works out swimmingly. And with Mike talking about how much he wants to be like the Ganassis and Penske's of the world, well, both of those teams run with 3 cars. So you have an opportunity to do that, to build your team and to have factory backing. Like, I don't think you get rid of it. So I think those things are going to stay exactly as they are.
Rinus VeeKay, your thoughts on that? Because it seems like the chatter is picking up, and we've heard it many times over the last couple of years. Does somebody come in and buy out Ricardo Juncos and move that team somewhere to a different name? Does maybe a Nolan Siegel land back at Juncos, kind of where it did all start for him a few years ago? Does somebody sign a check? Does Stingray stay, which I don't see happening? So what happens with Rinus, and then what ultimately happens with Juncos Hollinger Racing?
It's tough because I think Rinus might actually be best served to stay. Wait a year. I know he's got a 1-year deal, and he can play the field a little bit, but I don't know if he's, what's weird is almost I feel like he had more hype in that season with Dale Coyne than he's had so far driving for Juncos, which is in a lot of ways objectively a better car. So I don't know if Rinus' stock is much bigger or much higher than it was last year. So maybe you stay at Juncos for an extra year, maybe do another 1-year deal if you're Rinus. Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about what the future might hold for Juncos, who might buy in. I know Connor Daly has been talking a little bit about how confident he is about potentially going back full-time in 2027. I think you have to look at the partnership, at least for the Indy 500, between Dreyer and Reinbold and Juncos as a potential possibility to see something happen on a full-time basis with Dreyer and Reinbold. Who knows? I would worry about that from an Indy 500 entry list perspective because if Dreyer buys Juncos, that to me, doing my math in my head, we're down 2 cars for the 500. So I almost kind of hope that doesn't happen, but we'll see.
And there's going to be some other rides that ultimately become open as well, depending on what Dale Coyne Racing does. I think there's going to have to be some major changes in that team if they want to keep Roman Grosjean. It's been an up and down, frustrating season so far for him. Before we wrap up, we want to say shout out to our friend Allie. She is cancer free. We saw her up in Detroit last week for that race, so we're so happy to see that. And again, thank you everybody for being in the chat tonight. Kyle, what you got going on this weekend? And then we'll let David talk about that race that he's been to a few times that last 24 hours.
Yeah, this weekend is the SCUSA Pro Tour at Cincinnati. It's the second time I've been in Cincinnati during the SCUSA Pro Tour. Hopefully next year. I think next year it's on the same weekend, but I'm trying to go to Le Mans with David. But yeah, it's our biggest series that we cover. And it's where the pros come out and they shine. So the pro shifter category should be fun. The finals are for free on Sunday. So if you're itching for no IndyCar, but you still want some open wheels, we've got American karting on this weekend. Should be cool.
I will not be
David.
watching the karting at Cincinnati this weekend. I'll be watching the 24 Hours of Le Mans. I will not be there this year. A couple of people have asked me about it. It seems like Le Mans is turning into a once every 2 year thing for me. So we've already been talking, as Kyle mentioned, about going back next year.
I'm going next year no matter what.
All right, so
It
Kyle's
has
committed.
like been a dream. I all the boys have gone the last 2 times without me. So the trip is on the table. I've told Chris for months now. I've said I will be there no matter what.
Right.
I will be in France next June.
All right, so on the silly season chart, lock in Kyle, 24 Hours of Le Mans 2027. Oh my God, I can't believe we're already saying that number already. But yeah, Le Mans is awesome. I'm looking forward to watching it. I mean, I don't expect it's going to be anything other than a Ferrari or a Toyota win, but I'm happy to be excited and surprised. The Aston Martin was quick during the test day, the test weekend, I suppose, at Le Mans. I don't have enough copium in the world to believe that the Aston Martin will win when we get to 4:00 France time on Sunday. But never say never. Anything is possible. But I'm looking forward to it. It's if you've never been to Le Mans, the closest thing I can compare it to is the Indianapolis 500. So it is an amazing event. I'm really looking forward to watching it, at least this year from the comfort of my own home, which is going to be kind of nice. And it's going to be nice, by the way, to have a week off, because I had done the math. I don't know if I've said this publicly yet, but I think I've been gone or at a racetrack 17 out of the 23 weekends of the year so far. So I'm kind of looking forward to being home.
I party at David's house, plenty of Dr. Pepper, ice cream, and Taco Bell for the weekend.
I'm going to be 200 pounds by the time we get to Road America, just to eat some more brats.
There you go. Road America will be fun. We'll be back next Tuesday here on Unverified. For Kyle, for David, I'm Tony. Thanks for being here. Subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you guys so much for watching yet another episode of Unverified. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and be on the lookout for more content on the Unverified YouTube channel, as well as all of our other social media platforms on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook at Unverified_show. Make sure while you're at it as well to get yourself geared up with some Indianapolis 500 merchandise on the shopindy.com and use code Unverified15 for 15% off. As always, this is Kyle Cuthbertson. Thank you for watching Unverified, and we'll see you in the next show.